This episode of Dispatches from Planet Albany is brought to you with support by New York State United Teachers, which represents more than 600,000 educators and school-related professionals in New York. If you're interested in how your business or interest group can support Dispatches from Planet Albany, contact david.lombardo@wcny.org. And if you're interested in personally supporting the show, visit capitalpressroom.org/donate.
I've also declared war on potholes, so here's the first shot across the bow.
Well, as you know, with Planet Albany, there's always something that makes the planet turn.
And it's this amazing view of D.C., and Eddie Vedder comes out. And he goes, "You have a cigarette?" And I've never smoked in my life, but if I had, I wish that was the moment.
And this strategy takes us from potholes to knotholes.
I would like to say it was a pleasure, Mr. Kim. But I'm on the road.
I'm David Lombardo, and this is Dispatches from Planet Albany, a WCNY podcast about power and politics in New York. The June primary victory in New York City by Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani has created some awkwardness for mainstream Democrats in New York as they grapple with how to embrace or reject their party's mayoral candidate for November. But what approach is the right approach for the party? Should they lean into the antagonism of Representatives Laura Gillen and Tom Suozzi, who seem to be afraid of being tagged as socialist sympathizers? Should they embrace the fact that Zohran is their party's nominee and try to tap into his wave of support, like Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado? Or should they remain in endorsement purgatory, like Governor Hochul, Minority Leader Jeffries, and State Comptroller DiNapoli? Regardless of the right answer, it's clear that this is an issue for all of New York's Democrats, and not just those in the New York City area. So we're going to explore this question with Assemblymember Pat Burke, a Buffalo area Democrat. Thanks for joining us on Dispatches from Planet Albany, Assemblymember.
Hey, Dave. How you doing?
I'm good. So in the aftermath of the primary election, about 2 weeks later, you put out a communication on what your Assembly colleagues' victory meant and what it didn't mean. We'll get into the substance of the messaging in a second, but what prompted the email in the first place? Were you hearing from constituents about this guy that they had probably never heard of until now?
I mean, I think everyone's heard of him by now. It's kind of strange to have, a colleague of yours instantly become one of the most famous public figures in the country.
And not for bad reasons either, not like for a scandal or something.
Just for winning. It was very kind of AOC type of moment, right? Mm-hmm. And it's more of my position as chair of cities, which, I'm the first non-New York City member to ever chair that committee over, 150 years of its existence. And so I'm going to have a role to play. And I engage with a lot of folks from New York City on a nearly daily basis at this point. And the angst and upset over this victory is something I felt I needed to address, both from someone who knows Zohran, as well as someone who's going to have a role in how the city of New York governs itself. And really, I was trying to put people's minds at ease and saying, one, chill out. He's not that bad. Calm down. But two, if he were, I want to assure you that, from my position of chair of cities, that we'll do everything we need to do to make sure the city of New York is operating properly. And to remind people that New York City is incorporated by the state of New York, and that we do have influence over the decision-making process in the city.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about what you think that process might look like if Zohran's successful in November. But can you talk about the relationship that you do have with the Assembly member that got you to the point where you felt comfortable saying, chill out, he's not that bad?
Yeah, we're friends. We don't hang out every day, and we never did in our time in Albany. But we were always friendly and had a good relationship. And I just think it was the right thing to do. I don't like seeing people get bullied and get pushed around and having their name dragged. Politicians, public figures, we accept that people are going to say things about us that might not be true, or that might be unfair, or blur the lines between what is true and what isn't. And people will define us for their own interests. And so I just felt that it was the right thing to do, that you're just seeing someone get ripped apart. And there was certainly a vein of Islamophobia and a lot of the things I was hearing. And he's a human being, and I don't know him. I know him as a public figure, but I know him as a person, and so I just don't like sitting on the sideline watching something like that happen. So I felt, one, the need to say this needs to stop. This is out of bounds. This is going too far. But then, two, for people, I have a lot of friends who also have strong negative feelings towards Zohran. To them, it was also a reminder of okay, he's almost certainly going to win. I mean, it's not a guarantee, but it is a very, very high likelihood that he's going to be the next mayor of New York City. I absolutely hear the concerns about his lack of experience. I think that's actually a really legitimate concern. Hey, this guy is 33 years old, doesn't have a ton of governing experience. How is he going to run the city of New York? And I don't know how, it is such a complicated animal. You would have to have a ton of executive experience to jump into a role like that. But I want to make sure this guy has a good team around him, and I don't think we're going to do that if we just keep casting aspersions on him as Democrats.
So you mentioned that as chair of the Assembly Cities Committee, you're going to have some level of oversight or checks and balance on what his agenda might be, because some of it needs to go through Albany. What are your expectations, if there is a Mamdani administration, for your committee's role? Because there is some flexibility in the legislature in terms of the committee process. Theoretically, you guys could be circumvented completely. They could say, we're going right to rules with this bad boy, or we're going to tuck it into the budget. And so, sorry, Pat Burke, your plans have been avoided. We are circumventing you. I mean, what is your expectation for your role in 2026 and beyond?
Well, it's going to be really active. That can happen, right? Things can be put into rules. Things can, you can go around the committee process. But I'm not going to, I'm not going to be, a wallflower or shrinking violet. I will be I am an active chair. And I will be vocal. We will make sure that the committee is given its due respect. And I expect most of that process to happen through the city's committee. And if there is a major issue, or if there are concerns with the committee members on a certain subject matter, and if there's something that's necessary or there's something there's a time constraint on something, it's certainly possible to get around the committee process, but it's not common. It takes several steps. The appropriate thing to do is to go through the committee. It's what I'll expect. It's what I'll demand from my committee, and we'll do our jobs.
And the Assembly, I should say, compared to the Senate, is much more respectful of the committee process. You guys like to have bills touch almost every single committee, it seems, compared to the Senate, where they're just one committee, let's get this to the floor ASAP. So it seems like you have more opportunities there.
Feels like more work, but
hey, you go to the speaker tomorrow. You tell him, you could skip cities. I'm sure he'd be like, great, sounds good, Pat.
Let's stop. Let's pump the brakes on that. No, sure, it is more of a challenge to get things done through the Assembly, and I don't think it's because of it's not. You're almost implying that it's like a bureaucratic process, and really.
No, I think they're saying that. Yeah, I think they're respectful of the committee chairs. They're saying, we've made you chairs. We're going to give your committee a chance to weigh in, whereas the Senate doesn't take that approach.
And honestly, it takes a long time to become a chair in the Assembly. Like the Senate, I think every senator comes in now and gets a chair of a chair of something. It's not how it works. I'm in my fourth term, and I'm kind of early to the punch on getting a committee that does something. So. It's hard to get here. It takes a long time, and I'm glad and grateful that the speaker, has entrusted this committee to me, but then two, we get to do the real work through it for sure.
Well, what would your approach be to some of the issues that might need legislative approval? Do you try to lean towards more deference to the city and what it wants to do? Or is there a broader litmus test and say, well, I think about how this might apply to Buffalo as well. And if it's not good enough for Buffalo, it's not good enough for New York City. How do you think about green lighting things?
Absolutely no deference. No, the city's in place or the city's committee is in place for a reason. We have a structure like this for a reason. You have to, consult the state and ask for permission or get certain legislation passed for a reason. Certainly work with, our colleagues in the city of New York and every other city in the state of New York. But it's not, deference is definitely not the word I would use. I would say a collaboration, and you try and have everyone in the room, especially when there's issues or there's contentious issues where you have different parties not agreeing on what needs to be done. It's trying to find a compromise, but I don't think we're in the position. I don't think we should be putting ourselves in the position to just defer to municipal leaders. Unfortunately, I have this experience all too often, is that people make bad decisions. They make local leaders can make really short-sighted decisions that have long-term effects, and long-term effects for the whole state of New York, for our budget, for the tax base of New York. And so I like to work collaboratively, but not defer exclusively to their decision making.
Well, when you think about the potential for a Mamdani administration, do you think that as an assembly member, Zohran has built up connections, let's start with the assembly, to help move his agenda through? Or the fact that he's only been here for 5 legislative sessions, is part of a progressive wing that is not representative of the mass of the conference, mean that he does not necessarily have the strongest ties throughout the chamber to help him get his agenda through the Capitol?
I mean, it works both ways. He has some strong relationships that he's been able to build, and then there's probably some relationships that are soured through the experiences he's had in the assembly, in our conference. But it's better than not understanding the process at all. Coming in blind, I think would be the biggest problem, or letting others define you would be the bigger problem. A lot of people have strong opinions. A lot of assembly members have strong opinions about Zohran one way or the other, but they're probably mostly formed by their interactions with him rather than what the New York Post might be saying about him. So I think that is probably a net benefit for him and for the city of New York and the agenda he wants to put forward. But he's a controversial figure, and I don't think that anyone's looking to just greenlight what he wants to do without a proper look at it, a proper analysis and oversight.
And what about from a philosophical perspective? Do you think that there are the votes to move things along, like, well, free buses is really an MTA question, but universal childcare or increasing taxes, all things that could potentially need some sort of state sign-off? Do you think there's an appetite in the legislature to greenlight those elements of his agenda?
We'll see. Something about the sort of socialist label is a problem. It's a problem for me too. It actually kind of drives me nuts. You have people dying on the word of being socialist or a socialist identity rather than the substantive things. So, and I always, you look to FDR, New Deal Democrats. I think that is sort of the beacon for current Democrats.
Yeah.
And FDR would be attacked all the time for being a socialist, for doing all these public programs. And he'd be like, socialist? I'm not a socialist. I do think there should be a chicken in every pot. And that's what we should be doing, instead of you've got a group of people like, no, I am a socialist. Like, find the most divisive language and then attach yourself to it. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I find it very, very frustrating and impractical. It might work for their group and that group identity that is so important to so many people, but it doesn't work for I don't think, the Democratic Party at large. And we can talk about the policies themselves and separate it from the word. And I just think it's a really bad idea to constantly be attaching yourself to that word. So let's talk about those actual policies and see how they work. Some of the policies Zohran is advocating for are actually happening in other areas, and no one's calling them socialist. They're just programs. We're trying to solve problems. We're trying to use government to solve problems. But because this group identity is so is so attached themselves to this thing, it kind of muddies what the policies are, and I find that enormously frustrating.
Need help keeping track of the legislative session? Wish you had an extra set of eyes at the Capitol? New York State Watch does all of that and much more. Discover New York State premier legislative intelligence service by visiting nystatewatch.net or contacting Shane King at statewatch.com to learn more. Well, I'm glad you bring up this language issue because it seems to be one of the things that the Democrats, the mainstream Democrats, are hung up on when they're asked about Zohran's policies or endorsing him. And to me, it seems really simple. You say, where we can work together on affordability, I'm excited to tap into the energy that he's generated. And where we disagree, I will fight tooth and nail for what I think is right. And maybe there's some nuance here and there. But what do you think is the right way for the state Democratic Party and maybe even the national Democrats to handle this victory? Because it seems like the plan right now is to arrange themselves in a circle, hand out guns, and start shooting at each other.
There's a bunch that needs to be done. One, I recognize the actual energy within the party. Like, recognize where people are and want to go. And we need new leadership. You have got folks who have been around an enormously long time, who are, 80 years old or climbing towards it, and they're very hesitant to turn over the reins to new people and where the energy is. I think we should really stop focusing on Zohran. One, I think he's going to win. We don't know if he's going to win. We went through this process in the city of Buffalo 4 years ago.
Oh, I'm going to ask you about that.
So we went through it. We did it, and then she got clobbered in the general election in a write-in campaign by the incumbent Democrat who was deeply unpopular and who took overwhelming support and money from right-wing Republicans, and she lost. So I think we should stop zoning in on Zohran so much, recognize the policies that are very, very popular across the political spectrum, and stop being, frankly, just so annoying. Like the poll watching, the nitpickiness, the fingernail biting. Just go do stuff. Just go help people. Just go lead. Fight this very bad fascist government that we have right now. Stop them from hurting people. And if Zohran helps in that, then work with him. And if he hurts in that, then don't. But right now, the liberal circular firing squad, as you're referring to, has to figure their stuff out. It's but I think in the end, I would say we need a shot in the arm of youthful fire leadership. We need people to meet the moment that we're in, and we got to stop pretending. We got to stop saying the really stupid thing, which every election in front of us is the most consequential of our lifetime. It's just such a meaningless term. Like, they're all very consequential right now. We can't afford to lose anything more. We do need to turn things back. And again, we need some of our older leaders to truly be great leaders right now would be to move along.
But if you're someone like Governor Kathy Hochul, not one of our older leaders, who's going to be running for re-election in 2026, how would you advise her to handle this? I mean, Western New York. Is this something where she needs to push away in order to retain upstate New York? Is this an area where she needs to lean in to try to, see if any of that energy rubs off on her with New York City, which ultimately is where she's going to get her victory in November? I mean, how should she walk that line? Because right now, it's mostly just trying to avoid committing one way or another.
He's the Democratic nominee. We don't have to like who the people picked for our party, but if they do in a democratic process, and he also won overwhelmingly, you don't have to buy into everything someone does to say, all right, this is the nominee. Who are the other options? Of the options available, this is the best option, and he is the nominee, and we respect the process.
And if I can just interrupt for a second, do you think it's a false binary to say, well, for Republicans then, it's okay for them to support Donald Trump back in 2024 because that was their party's nominee? Or do you think it's the equivalent with Zohran Mamdani?
There's a false equivalency between those two.
Yeah.
And I think it's unfair. I think like that, and I'm not saying you're saying it's unfair. I understand it's hypothetical, but people are doing it like, oh, you have your crazies and we have our crazies. You have AOC and Zohran Mamdani who want to make sure that people can eat food and have health care, and then there's our crazies who want to burn down the Capitol and hang Mike Pence. Those aren't the same thing.
No.
That's like
it's a false mainstream media choice.
It's outrageous. Like, it's offensive. Sorry. So you're quite. So what?
Sorry, that was a side note on just how you think the governor should be approaching this, because it seems like there is a way to, at least not. There seems like there's a pitch to swing at here, and not necessarily one that you need to let go, because her lieutenant governor is basically, trying to cozy on up to Zohran and see if he can ride that wave. And for people listening,
you gotta be yourself.
Dismissive hand wave.
That's not dismissive to him. It's dismissive of people not being authentic.
Exactly.
Themselves. You know what I mean? Like Kathy Hochul, if it's. I saw this clip the other day of Mitt Romney, and he goes, and you've probably seen it, and I never saw it, so I found it so shocking. He goes in a group of young black kids and goes, "Who let the dogs out? Woof, woof." Like, did you ever see that one?
Yes. It's like Chevy Chase in Vacation going, "What it is, Holmes, what it is." Yeah,
exactly. Like, we don't need Kathy Hochul trying to be like Zohran Mamdani or wrap her arms around Zohran Mamdani. She's her own person, and she's from Buffalo, and if she tried, no one would believe it anyway.
That's a good point.
But she is the leader of our state and the leader of the Democratic Party here. But we all don't have to agree with each other. I don't agree with Kathy Hochul on things, and I've publicly addressed the things when I have concerns. But we are in the same party, and we are all fighting against something much more dangerous and greater than ourselves, and we just got to figure it out. So she doesn't need to attach herself to him, but she shouldn't. I don't think she should avoid him either, and I don't think anyone else should either.
We've made reference to the previous election in Buffalo where India Walton, a socialist, won the Democratic primary against then incumbent Byron Brown, who then was successful in launching a write-in campaign. What do you think of the idea that there are parallels to that? Because from a certain sense, sure, socialist beats the favored, more moderate candidate, but Zohran seems like a completely different animal. His victory got a lot more attention. The election itself got a lot more attention. And conversely, though, from the idea that he might lose, as opposed to doing a write-in campaign, Andrew Cuomo's on the ballot in November. So how do you think about all of those comparisons that are getting some attention now?
They're there, and if Zohran allows this race to be a referendum on him, a guy who hasn't governed the city of New York or the state of New York, compared to two people who did, and two people who did very problematically, that he could lose. Different in the fact that Buffalo is one-on-one. It was India Walton versus Byron Brown again. You had a base of people who had been accustomed and comfortable with Byron Brown for a very long time, even if they were tired of him. Maybe it's not fair Monday morning quarterbacks to the Walton people, but they fully allowed that election to be a referendum on her as a person. And they allowed sort of a caricature of who she was. And they shouldn't have done that. They should have been punching back the whole time. They should have been, they didn't, I think, from my observations, they didn't really run in like what I would have seen as like a negative campaign, but there wasn't a lot of counter punching going on. It was just like taking shots left and right from a 4-term incumbent who had become unpopular for reasons on governing and snow removal and all these things. And they just didn't do it. So if Zohran allows the same thing and allows everything to be about I think accusations of anti-Semitism and and sort of wacky policies that don't have a place in New York, or bankrupting the city of New York, he's going to be in trouble. But if he counterpunches and defends his positions, I think he'll still probably be the victor. And there's also several other people in that race. Unless a bunch of them drop out, just mathematically, I don't see how someone else is going to win.
Well, lastly, looking ahead to 2026, there's going to be a lot of items that are going to be framing the budget process and the session. You're going to have whatever's going on in Washington, D.C. at the moment. You'll have potentially the Mamdani administration. You'll potentially have a primary challenge. Don't know how serious it is, kind of skeptical, from Lieutenant Governor. Then you'll also have a Republican waiting to take on the governor in November. And then you'll have all of the state lawmakers who have their own elections. Which of those items do you think is going to be most influential on the legislative session?
Obviously, I think, we're up for re-election. So that's probably going to have the biggest impact on everyone makes decisions based on, from their own viewpoint and interests, certainly. So we'll be dealing with that. But if it's Kathy Hochul versus Elise Stefanik, I think we're gonna very clearly win that race, but we are gonna go hard. I know I will, because it's when something is so evident and so in your face of what you're fighting for, that will, I think, be the defining thing for sure. And there are a lot of, there's disagreements within the Democratic Party and criticisms of, the governor or leadership. But when it's all hands on deck and it's not time for finger pointing and it's time to fight for, people's rights for survival, I think you'll have a group that coalesces around that. And no better person to coalesce against than Elise Stefanik.
Well, we've been speaking with Assemblymember Pat Burke. He is a Buffalo area Democrat who chairs his chamber's cities committee. Assemblymember, thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Dave.
My mother-in-law would tell me that I am not a true New Yorker yet.